All right, today we find ourselves in Chapter 1, Section 1, which is talking about the purposes and origin of the government. And of course, the question is, why do we need it? So, to look back at government, why do we study it? First of all, it's a social science. And what a social science is, it's a scientific study of humans, the society, and their social relationships. So, it's how do we go and we interact together to create laws, to create structure and organization and avoid chaos. The problem, of course, is it's basically a science, but when you put a whole lot of people in it, it causes a lot of drama. So situations are not always straightforward, and there's a lot of debate and discussion of what works the best. The problem, of course, is people are selfish, people are sometimes indecisive, people have different opinions, sometimes they're greedy, and they make irrational decisions. So when you have all these things that are going in and we bring a lot of people together, sometimes we have a problem figuring out what's right versus wrong, what's good versus bad, and what is socially acceptable and what's not. So it's a science. In science, we could test a theory using the scientific method, which we've talked about before. In a social science, we could test a theory, but then people can change their minds. So it's tough to say, what are the thoughts, the process, can we actually come from point A to point B? But what happens when we get to point B if people aren't happy and we want to go back to point A? Because again, we refer back to this previous slide where people are selfish and indecisive and have different opinions and they're greedy and irrational at times. So it can be super frustrating, but then again, so is politics. And we look at the etymology of the word itself. Poly comes from the Greek term meaning many or much, and tix comes from French, and it means painful twitch, or in Egyptian, blood-sucking mite. So politics truly means many blood-sucking mites, or much blood-sucking mites. So the whole concept is it's very tough, and we talked about in the first introduction, is that's why people have a problem with politics, because we could have two very rational, intelligent, educated people who have totally different opinions on how we should operate or work. So the concept comes back to looking in history, in America especially, the idea of natural right. In the American colonies, people believed that everyone had the right to life, liberty, and prosperity. Prosperity meaning the right to do better, to grow and do better. Everyone should have them just because they're human beings, point blank. Because you were born, you should have that ability to be able to have life, liberty, and prosperity. It shouldn't be taken away without a person's agreement, meaning that I can't put you in jail because I don't like you, but you have, as a person, need to succumb to to the rules and laws of the society in order to be a part or an active member of that of that place. Sovereignty in this area means a supreme and absolute authority within territorial boundaries. We look at it from the idea of popular sovereignty in the United States, meaning that we vote for the laws that are going to rule us. So when you have a rule or a law that you don't agree with, you have rights to try to challenge those laws, meaning that you have a court system that can fight back, or you have the ability to vote people out who made those decisions and bring in people who are going to be more aligned with what you believe and what you think. Besides that, other people we talked about before was the rights of God. They have believed in natural rights. There were rights from God, and in the book it calls it divine rights. So the theory over here is God gave the power to the king, and the king therefore gives the rules and the laws to the people. It's a top-down approach where you feel at some levels people will actually believe that they're on the same level as God, a king or a ruler, when you look at more ancient societies and monarchies, which we'll talk about later on. Looked at modern-day dictatorships across the world where the people who are ruling believe that God gave them the power to rule, and therefore they have that right. So one of the interesting characters we'll talk about a lot in the first chapter is John Locke, and he's an English philosopher from the 1600s. He wrote 2 treatises on the civil government, and the government should protect natural rights, meaning the natural rights of people, meaning the ability to live, the ability to earn money, to do things. Even kings are not powerful. They should not have absolute power. Everybody should be a part of the society in some way. We have to have structure, but everybody should play their part in their role. And Americans, we agreed when we were founding the country. So he thought, protecting natural rights, what would life be without government or laws? And what Locke believed is it would become a state of nature. It would be a nasty, brutish, and short life, meaning that there's so much disorganization that rights will be taken away from people, meaning that you don't have the ability to live because, let's say, a rival gang came up and, decided to start shooting or killing another group. That's because there's not the structure in place in a anarchist style society, meaning that where there's not rules that are formalized. So I want you to think about this, and we'll talk about this in class, is, this classroom, let's pretend we're the only people here in Montauk. There's no other people. There's no cars, no buses. It's our own little world. There's no government or structure. Even me, I don't have the right to tell you what to do. So, the first day you might say, this is great, this is awesome, people are going to do whatever they want to do, don't have to go to school, you can just kind of chill out and do your own thing. That sounds great the first day, and maybe the first week. But what happens this month, next year? Are we going to continue to have a state of anarchy where there's no government and structure? Why or why not? And we're going to discuss that in class. These are to be the questions you're going to answer. So John Locke's thoughts are, and if he looked at that problem that I gave you, number one, stronger and smarter people might try to take away other people's lives, liberty, or property. Typically what you'll see is weaker people might band together and take away the rights of the stronger and smarter people, and people would be unprotected and insecure. The whole process would be is, people would kind of gang up in little groups or little cliques and try to figure out what's the best way to rule the society. But of course, it comes back to what I said before. People are greedy. So sometimes they might take on more power or more thoughts or more responsibilities than what's actually needed. And therefore, it's going to backfire on them. And the weak people could come together and say, hey, I've had enough. I'm taking you out. Because there's no rules and no laws. And you have to come through. So it's this whole idea of social contract, meaning that the person who is put in power must also have the respect or the admiration of the people who do not have the power. Meaning that if I came in here today and I said, listen, everybody jump up and down, you're going to look at me like I'm crazy. All right? But if I said to you, hey, after a great year and you all got to know me very well, we have a great year together, at the end of the year I ask you for help, you're probably going to do it. It's that mutual respect. So it's a social contract. You as students come in here, but you have a social contract to the school with expectations that you're here to learn. So with all the problems that would exist, Locke believed that people should consent to follow the laws in exchange for the protection that it gave people. This agreement is called a social compact in some places. The book uses the term social contract. Government can regulate laws at the same time protecting people. We own our government. We own the decisions. So if we don't like what's being said or what's being done, we have the power of the vote to change those laws and change things. It's because of a social contract. We don't have the ability to just kind of have out with martial law and go crazy, but we have the ability to fight back in that sense because our founding fathers gave us that right through a social contract. We pay the taxes, they give us the support. We expect that the support is going to help us live a better and healthier life, and that's why we have a government.